Right, good morning, everybody. We'll just leave it another minute while attendees arrive, but welcome. Okay, we will make a start. We're 11:01. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to the NEC round of webinars. Today we're going to be having a conversation with members of the Ministry of Justice, focusing on the prisons programme. So further to previous government's commitments to put 20,000 new police on the streets, sentencing policies, the ageing estate and capacity projections, the Ministry of Justice is delivering 20,000 new prison places through a range of schemes via different routes to market, including the Caron Commercial Service frameworks, including new prisons, expansion programmes to existing closed and open prison estates, shorter term measures such as rapid deployment cells, and within the 20,000 prison place programme, new prisons will deliver about half of those, so about 10,000 prison places. 3 of these prisons have been delivered already. So HMP 5 Wells was opened in 2022. HMP Fossway was in 2023. HMP Millsike reached construction completion at the end of January this year. And is opening to take prisoners in a few months following a mobilisation period. The programme of works was procured via the Caron Commercial Service framework, utilising strategic alliance procurement methods with Framework Alliance Contract 1, so FAC-1 as the alliance form, and with NEC as the project contract terms. So in this session, we're going to have a conversation about the new prison programme itself, and more specifically HMP Millsike. This will give you an insight into some of the major government infrastructure programmes that are ongoing. So again, welcome. Thank you for being here. We have a Q&A section in the call, so if you have questions, please just type them in. I will try my best to facilitate as many questions as I possibly can. I'm John Welch, Commercial Director for Estates Category Group in Caron Commercial Service, and also NEC Users Group Chair. So I'm pleased to introduce you to Melissa Dudley. Melissa is Deputy Director for the 20,000 Prison Place Programme, and Caron Johnson, who is the MOJ's Sustainable Construction Lead. Melissa, Caron, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, thank you.
Oh, no problem at all. Thank you for this. It's really going to be insightful, and yeah, we'll just have a conversation and pick up some questions as we go, those that pop in. But I guess firstly, though, if you could share a little bit about yourself, background, your experience with MOJ. Melissa, if we start with you, that's okay.
Yep, happy to do so. So as you said, John, my name is Melissa Dudley. I am the Commercial Construction Director for the MOJ, responsible for delivery of the 20,000 new prison place programme. I've been with the MOJ for about 8 years now, and delivered HMP 5 Wells, HMP Fossway, and last month, as you mentioned, HMP Millsike, which is an enormous milestone for us. So it's been a couple of weeks of celebration. Prior to this programme, I worked across estates and facilities management in the MOJ, as well as roles in Department for Education and also Government Legal Department.
Wow, excellent. Thank you. Caron?
Hi, I'm a relative newcomer to the MOJ. So I'm Caron Johnson. I'm the Sustainable Construction Project Lead. So my background's in both construction and sustainability. I'm a fellow of CIOB and Chartered Environmentalist. And my major project experience before the MOJ was at the National Forest and also the Eden Project in Cornwall, but also working for a Tier 1 contractor, which is a useful perspective on looking at both sides of the contract. At the MOJ, my role is actually to work with colleagues such as Melissa, the commercial teams and the supply chain to embed our sustainability ambitions. We've said Millsike's the greenest prison. Well, what does that look like when we go all the way through from setting those targets embedded into contracts delivery? And that's what we're talking about later. So I'm there to set the standards and help embed it, and lessons learned across the whole expansion portfolio and things as well. So it's not just one-off. We actually do quite a lot of ensuring we do learn the lessons. So that's me, and I were talking more about sustainability later.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, can't wait. That sounds awesome. Okay, so again, welcome both. So first one for me then, what is the new prison capacity portfolio?
So you talked a little bit about it in your intro, but as you said, further to the last government's commitment, which included 20,000 more police on the streets, changes in policy on sentencing and who would go to prison and for how long, the fact that our prison estate is ageing, and also how projections for what demand is going to be like in the prison estate, what our capacity is looking like. As a result of all of those things, there was a need for the MOJ to deliver 20,000 new prison places, and we're doing that, like you said, through a range of different schemes. So that includes some of the brand new prisons that we've just described, and we've got a picture of one of those to show everyone a little bit later, but also expanding some of our existing prison sites. That includes both the closed and open estate, like you said, so closed prisons or open prisons where what we call category D, where people can leave for work and come in and out within certain parameters. But also, like you said, the shorter term measures that we've got, such as the rapid deployment cells, which are modular accommodation that can be installed on sites more quickly. So in terms of what the new prison capacity portfolio has delivered so far, HMP 5 Wells in Wellingborough was opened in 2022, HMP Fosse Way in Leicester was opened in 2023, and HMP Millsike, which is in York, or near York, reached construction completion on the 27th of January this year, so very recently. And like you say, that opens to take prisoners shortly following a mobilisation period. So that's what the new prison capacity portfolio is and has been delivering. Due to planning delays for the new prison builds, the last schemes of the programme are now currently due to complete in 2031, so it's quite a long duration in terms of the programme, and the programme is forecast to cost circa 9 billion, just to give people an idea of scale.
Wow, huge then. Huge, but significant progress, as you've said, and given some of the constraints, definitely from a planning perspective. I think you guys within MOJ and with the supply chain have done a fantastic job so far in not only the prison portfolio itself, but specifically with the new prisons as well. So we've said it takes up, or the new prisons take up almost half of the capacity of the portfolio then, and Millsike has just been completed then. So specifically to Millsike, can you just explain the project itself? I'm relatively close to it, having had the benefit of working with you guys, but I found it really interesting and think it would be helpful for the audience as well to hear just what the project is about.
Yeah, happy to do that. So as you said, the new prison capacity programme is the biggest prison building programme in more than a century. So you already mentioned alliancing, and that's how we've delivered the new prisons so far and how we will continue to do so. So the New Prisons Alliance were appointed to deliver 4 brand new prison builds further to HMP 5 Wells and HMP Fosse Way, which were part of the legacy programme before it, but form part of the wider 20,000 places. So the 4 prisons that I'm talking about here, of which Millsike is the first, will deliver around 6,500 of those 20,000 new prison places for the estate, built to an all-electric and rehabilitation-led design that Caron will talk about in a bit more detail shortly. But HMP Millsike is the brand new prison. Let me just see if I can share a photo, just so that people can get an idea of what it looks like.
Yeah,
One moment. I'm going to have to zoom in, I think, because it's a bit small. Let me know when you can see that.
I can see that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So this is what HMP Millsike looks like very recently. So I don't know if you can see my cursor or not. I'm guessing you probably can't. So if not, I'll just describe.
No, it's there. It's
Yeah,
there for
oh,
me
it is.
anyway.
Okay, perfect. So even better. So these big cross-shaped blocks that you can see are the house blocks. So these hold about 240 men across 4 different floors. and you can see that in this case it's a flat roof design with a plant on the roof. There are 6 of these at Millsike, and some of our other prisons have got one more house block depending on the layout of the site. And then you can see in the background some of our other buildings that are our ancillary support buildings. So you'll see this is our heavy and light industry workshops. You can see we've got a central services hub here, which houses education and healthcare, for example. And we also have an entrance building, which is where staff and prisoners will come into the prison. So this just gives you an idea of the size of and the scale of a new prison build. It's very much like a campus type feel to it. They're very significant in size, and we'll talk a bit more about the design shortly. But in this case for Millsike is right next door to HMP Full Sutton, which is an existing Category A prison, an older Category A prison, which is just over here. So I'll leave the photo up while I talk, just again so that people can visualise. But as we said, Millsike is the first of 4 new prisons, the other 3 also being next to existing prison sites, and those are Gartree, Grendon and Garth Wymont. While we have experienced challenges in the planning process, that has resulted in delays to those other 3 prisons. HMP Millsike entered main works delivery in July 2022 with Kia as the main constructor, and it completed, like I said, at the end of last month, which is a big milestone for the programme. Mighty will operate the prison. They are mobilising now in readiness for the arrival of the first prisoner. It's a Category C prison for those who are near the end of their sentence, and this site delivers circa 1,500 new prison places, and the contract value was £454 million. The Millsike design is largely based on that of HMP Five Wells and Fossway that I talked about, the 2 that came before it, with the same aims in terms of rehabilitation and the design focus. For example, it has barless windows with a reinforced design that allow for a more normalised environment. Like I mentioned, a large visits hall and designated areas for prisoners to spend time with their families, workshops and education spaces so that people have purposeful activity, especially near the end of their sentence, and house blocks which create a community feel on each landing. So some of the pictures that you see in the press of prisons with the galleried landings, where people can kind of shout up and down the different floors. These have got much more of a closed off design, and so each community of circa 60 prisoners have their own kind of group, and there's separation between the different landings. So all of this is based on research and that rehabilitation led approach to make sure that we get the best outcomes for people who are in custody. So like I say, it looks very similar from an aerial view to Fossway and Five Wells, but Millsike goes a lot further than prisons before it, particularly in terms of sustainability. And Caron might want to talk to some of that.
Yeah, I think you described it really well. It's really interesting seeing being relatively new to sort of prison design. It's really interesting. I came from Eden, but sitting in design team meetings talk about biophilic design palettes, and it is very much around that sort of rehabilitation. But interestingly, when it comes to sort of following it all the way through, it's how we've defined those sustainability targets that's been really important. So this is the first of our prison sites to actually specify a biodiversity net gain of 10%. Bear in mind, this is prior to the Environment Act and things as well. So this is something very new. It's the first time we've delivered it at a prison. It's our first all-electric prison. So again, it's really quite unique in that, and setting those standards, yes, and sort of setting a target of that energy reduction. And we actually set a target, and this is where the FAC-1 contract comes in, of 70% across the 4 new prisons. And as Melissa said, this design has a flat roof design. The other prisons have a pitched roof design, which enables more PVs on them. So they get even better performance and things as well. But Millsike being the first is sort of the transition from Fossway and the others into the 3Gs. So that's been really interesting, taking those specifics. So one of the things we did when we were trying to sort of say what we wanted was we actually use BREEAM. So we try and set our standards through quite high standards of BREEAM. Quite often it's outstanding. In the case of Millsike, because of the energy credits, it was excellent, but I'm endeavouring to get towards outstanding as that. But we also specify credits within that. So I know there's been interest on what we've looked at for climate change adaptations and things as well, and what clauses we've used. So we haven't used anything like the Chancery Lane or the X29, but we have specified BREEAM mandatory credits, including Waste 05, which is adaptation to climate change. So there have been very clear deliverables that have gone into the contracts. It's been interesting working with the contractors because as the first one, there were things set in their performance specifications for things like water use that they weren't sure that there were products on the markets that could deliver. So when it came to signing contracts, there was quite a lot of nervousness about what could be committed to. So we worked with the contractors' commercial teams and our commercial teams to actually sort of get the wording just right with best endeavours towards and actually where technically feasible. And actually the contractors who were only going to sign excellent with a score of 70 for BREEAM have actually agreed within the contract to aim for a score of 85%, which is a really high, and if they get the energy credits would be an outstanding. It's one of the highest across our portfolio, but it's embedding it into the contracts that really helps. But in the contract itself is not enough. I can talk about it a bit more later, but what really worked well is the alliancing. And Melissa and the team encouraged us to set up these special interest groups, which I can talk about more later. But that was taking particular barriers and things as well for these particular like BREEAM credits or water efficiency measures, and working across all of the contractors to come up with solutions to particular sort of sticking points, and then lots of lessons learned. So what makes Millsike unique is the design, but also the way it's been delivered and the alliancing form of contract that's enabled us to actually use the power of 4 tier 1 contractors to engage with the supply chain and market. So and the other thing, just before I'm going head back to that, is as well as using BREEAM, we also use ISO 19650, which is another contractual requirement for information management. And what we did was embed environmental requirements into that. So if you like, we have 2 ways of getting all the environmental information embedded into contracts and deliverables for the contractors. And then as I working with them at each stage to understand whether anything that is an issue is a perceived barrier or a real barrier, and then how we unblock it.
I think what Caron's touched on there is really important, which is from a client perspective, not just throwing requirements over the fence and saying deliver them, but having conversations with your delivery partners and with your contractors and your alliance team members to make sure that everybody understands the aims and objectives that each organisation is trying to achieve, and then work together to overcome the barriers. That's really critical, and that's been really central to our alliancing approach.
So I guess, I mean, okay, so that really interesting, and I think that takes us probably to, or me to, when I'm thinking about the structure, or maybe even the strategy of the procurements of the prison programme, and how sort of NEC fitted with FAC-1 into all of this. I think you've touched upon bits of it, both of you there, but it'd be helpful to just unpick that a bit more.
Yeah, of course. So you mentioned a bit earlier that we used the Crown Commercial Services, Commercial Works and Associated Services framework, and through that we adopted an alliance approach. So the New Prisons Alliance consists of 4 suppliers, plus the MOJ as the client, and our delivery partners and professional services through an integrated client team model, which means all the parties are at the table, also allows you to engage the supply chain as well, and engage early, which was really critical. So as an alliance, we created a logo that integrated the various parties under a single brand. You know, there's a lot of talk of leaving organisational brands at the door and uniting under that kind of single objective. And that was fundamental to our commercial strategy because of the scale and complexity of the project, as well as the need for consistency in standardisation of prison design. So like I mentioned, early involvement of contractors and the supply chain in the development of the projects was really central to the approach, beyond just understanding and inputting into risk and mitigation, but also from a buildability and a project development perspective, so that everybody was on the journey, everyone understood and was bought into the objectives of the programme. And helping everybody understand one another's objectives means that you can drive towards those outcomes. So to facilitate that, we had to create a contract model that enabled collaboration and engagement that was required to deliver such an ambitious programme. So the framework already utilises the FAC-1 form of contract, which is the framework and alliancing contract at the framework level, but also allows you to use that same form of contract at call-off. So we used the FAC-1 as, I'll call it, our umbrella collaboration agreement, and that was something that all parties signed up to so that everybody had the same common goals with clear phases of works and engagement with clear outputs and strategic aims. And then we have the NEC for PSC, professional services contract, short form and long form engineering construction contract terms that are embedded within the FAC-1. And that governs the actual work phases. So the FAC-1 as an umbrella agreement governs the entire duration of the programme right up to 2031 when it completes. But each works phase is governed by the NEC terms, and each site and each section of works are managed separately under each of those instructions governed by those NEC terms. It sounds a little bit complicated on the face of it, but effectively each instruction for works is not a new contract in itself because everybody has already signed up to the contract. That's the FAC-1, but each site is managed via its own NEC terms, which means that you don't get some of the complexities of cross liability between different contractors. It means that everybody is pulling towards the same goals in terms of we don't want one site to deliver at the expense of another, but also without some of the complex legal arrangements that would come from having joint liability. So that was the commercial model that we selected, and then upon appointment the Alliance entered into a collaboration phase which was governed by that FAC-1, with specifically funded resources that were ring-fenced to drive those benefits. They jointly reviewed and inputted into the client-led design ahead of design being transferred. They shared their learning from previous prison build projects, and organisations aligned their objectives to develop also a common supply chain, like I say, which helped with our objective of not exhausting the supply chain through repeated tendering of the same things, and also not having one project deliver at the expense of the others.
Wow. It sounds fascinating. The structure of it clearly worked. So I guess if you could sort of talk about maybe one or two things that work really well about the use of NEC and FAC-1 together.
Yeah, happy to. So I think the FAC-1 in itself provided us that vehicle for early engagement, for open information sharing in a structured way, but also in a way that enabled innovation, creativity and flexibility. It's not, it can be flexible to what you want to make it broadly, the FAC-1, in terms of how you set your objectives. But we wanted to embed, like I say, that flexibility and that ability for all of the parties, rather than having a kind of set fate right from the outset. We had a clear objective and we knew what we wanted to achieve, but the way that we did that was flexible within the contract. So we used it to set key milestones and deliverables, but in a way that was responsive to the outputs of those things, that was responsive to the outputs of collaboration and wasn't a constraint. And then integrating the NEC terms within that gave us a clear mechanism for instruction of works with tried and trusted industry contract terms that allow robust management and risk allocation. But that approach drove knowledge sharing, earlier engagement with the supply chain, innovation, design efficiencies, and encouraged all the parties, I think, to think differently and work together differently, kind of getting away from that kind of traditional combative constructor-client relationship. It gave us the benefits of NEC 4 forms of contract when it comes to kind of governing and managing physical site works in a very structured contract management process with clear mechanisms to deal with the inevitable change and risks that materialise during those sorts of works. But like I say, it also fostered the collaboration and innovation that we needed on a programme of this scale.
I mean, thank you for that, Melissa. I think just maybe just on the collaboration piece, you talked about the knowledge sharing. You've referenced the ability to access the supply chains as well, and a standard design to a degree. I think in terms of the collaborative approach, then how has that aided the delivery during the programme itself?
So I mentioned earlier that the new prison capacity programme is the biggest prison building programme in more than a century, and we had previous examples of projects being cancelled. So we really needed to steward the market appropriately, manage the capacity that we were, and the demand that we were placing on the market, and also ensure that there was appetite to deliver this. And so it required, like we said, an innovative, it's a mouthful, commercial approach. So if we had tendered the projects without a coordinated strategy, our position was that it would have created resourcing risk for not just MOJ, but also the market. We risked exhausting an already fragile and stretched supply base, competing demands, like I said, across the projects, excessive competition for supply chain capacity. We didn't want tier one contractors competing against one another, and program slippage. So instead, the collaborative approach created a world where we had shared goals and a joined up strategy. So we were able to prioritise the key focus areas for the MOJ, which, as I've already mentioned, include rehabilitation, sustainability, design standardisation, and delivery of that critical prison capacity at its core. We were able to engage the market early, get early involvement in from the supply chain to input into improving the design, collaborative risk management and opportunities to reduce risk as early as possible, alliance member involvement in our decision-making processes, and early involvement in delivery team decisions. So again, having everybody have a seat at the table, having people's views and opinions considered, making sure we've got that industry expertise embedded within the client decision-making process, scoping, input into early works and logistics planning, early design review and identification of opportunities for value engineering, for example, maximising social value outcomes. I could go on. There's a lot of benefits, integrating the teams, addressing challenges in market capacity and thinking about how we can smooth demand, what orders can we place early, how do we develop a strategy to manage the supply chain together, opportunities for off-site manufacturing, a development of new products for our technical standards, getting new products into our supply chain. There's a huge amount that can be achieved when organisations work together, and that sounds cheesy, but is true. When you bring together the knowledge and the experience of all those different organisations. And I think that that's really what we were trying to achieve through all of that collaboration.
And to your earlier point, the brand strategy, I think, plays a key part in that, to build that culture and that environment to, I've written down a phrase here I've used before, to collaborate to compete, knowing that there's still opportunity to deliver for each of the contractors. Allows them to collaborate more, even in a competitive environment. I love it. I think it's great. I'm just going to pause there and remind everybody there is an opportunity to ask some questions in the Q&A section here. We've had one in actually, which is it's about the commercial model. So regarding the commercial model, how did you decide which contractual requirements and terms were pinned at the higher FAC-1 level and those that were pinned at the individual NEC contract level?
I think that's a really good question. No, I've popped it open so I can reread it, but it's a really good question, and that took time and engagement to make sure that the structure was right and that it worked together. So broadly, we embedded the professional services contract elements into the FAC-1 itself, so that the FAC-1 operated as the service and collaboration consultancy type element, and then all of the works piece still sat within NEC. That's how we embedded it, but we also have flexibility within the contract to beyond just having short form and long form NEC versions, you can also tweak NEC within the FAC-1 as a whole. So you can create almost a hybrid between a short form and a long form NEC within that as well. So there's a lot of flexibility, but broadly, lots of engagement with legal to make sure that it was set up right at the outset, and then putting a lot of that, like I say, professional services type consultancy arrangement within the FAC-1, and then having the NEC govern the physical works. That's how we did it. That also requires a kind of process of learning lessons and making sure that mechanically it all works how you need it to, making sure that when you're instructing design that you've got the right rigor and mechanisms to manage that works for both the contractors and the client.
Yeah, of course. So I guess building on that then, what other tips might you have for users of NEC?
I think exploring what you can do with it is worth taking some time to think about right at the outset of your project, because once you're a way down the road in terms of developing a strategy, some of those doors might be closed off to you. But it's really important to think about what you want to achieve and what the objectives are, and then making the contracts work for you. And that really helped us, rather than starting with the contract and thinking about how you want to amend it. In terms of delivery under NEC, there are some really good training options to make sure that the teams that are administering the contracts are really well prepared for entering into and then managing them. NEC obviously has a lot of structure and process that supports best practice contract administration, and drives early closeout of risks and issues in the construction period, but it needs a good level of understanding and proper management in line with the processes that it sets out. That's important for delivery teams and commercial teams, and no one obviously more so than the project manager themselves. But I think that when you talk about that in the context of the FAC-1, it's also important to think about how the FAC-1 and the roles under the FAC-1 integrate with the roles under NEC as well. So there is a separation. There's an alliance manager under the FAC-1 and a project manager under NEC. And so thinking about how those roles play together and the difference between those roles, we obviously had teething issues. You have people who are really frightened to use an FAC-1 because they've never used it before and it's new. And so it takes a bit of a kind of educational piece of getting people comfortable with how those things play together. But also you have some people immediately wanting to apply NEC contract management practice to the FAC-1 elements. And so making sure that what we're doing has the right contractual mechanisms and that everybody's understanding how to administer it. We've been on a learning journey in the MOJ, but it's certainly been a positive one. And while we make tweaks to how things are expressed in the contract, I would absolutely use an FAC-1 with an NEC contract again.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. And I think that's probably going to take me to Caron, if that's all right. So making the sort of contract work for you, but actually to your point before, around the use of BREEAM or different metrics, it's also not being afraid to use what is available as well, different to the contract. So I guess my question is around how did the NEC and the contracts that you used here help with the sustainability goals that you talked about before regarding Millsike?
It's a bit like Melissa said, it's such a different way of working. It really is powerful. And I don't think we'd have got all the sustainability embedded in, and we certainly wouldn't get the benefits and the longer term lessons learned without that collaboration and that FAC. So, for example, by bringing everyone together, we've really sort of dived quite deeply into some of the potential issues and things as well. But interesting, because we were all together and working with a common and shared objective, we actually were enabled sort of looking at BREEAM with the BRE. So because they were 4 tier 1 contractors, it actually meant the contractors, we worked with them, and one of the objectives in sustainability, reduce cost and risk, which is quite unusual for a sustainability objective, but that was something the contractors could understand. And the risk is that actually prisons are so unique in their design. We talk about prison builds, but they're so different. A lot of things, there are no LETI targets for them. There are no net zero carbon building standards for them. The only things we actually have are BREEAM and BREEAM for prisons. And actually, Melissa referred to this as a campus design. We actually applied BREEAM as a campus level rather than individual building level. It's the first time it was done. So actually, all of the contractors were interested in how that was going to work for this and all the other prisons. But actually engaging with the BRE and taking them to site and saying, here's the unique nature of the prisons. And for the contractors being able to talk to the MOJ as a client and each other to find out, where there were similarities and where there were differences. I think they found it very beneficial. As a client, like Chris said, I absolutely recommend it. I think we're a much more informed client. So we work with the BRE. We've actually changed some of the BREEAM credits because they weren't prison specific enough by using science-based sort of evidence from the construction build, particularly on things like how we've done water efficiency and obviously designing for disassembly, although that's good in some ones, it's not necessarily good in a prison cell where actually you're using sort of, the whole point is not to disassemble things so it can become weaponized. So it was just that understanding and actually using the power of the 4 contractors coming together with the BRE, with all of the different assessors, and we've even got sub-working groups from our, we've got the special interest group, and then there are subgroups looking at setting carbon targets for prisons, looking at sort of social value and things as well. There's a separate group, but there's some real interest in green construction skills coming out of it, and then working with BREEAM to actually bring the knowledge together with all these different assessments going on. We've got a lot of knowledge, so the form of contract is really useful. So on site with the NE3 we can actually sort of deal with issues that come up, but then that knowledge is then spread across the rest of the alliance for the other new prisons. So actually, I think I said we actually Kier signed up to doing 85% as a BREEAM score. They've actually got 87.1 at design stage, going above what was in the contracts because of the ways of working. And I think that's what they're saying. They say it's the first time we delivered BNG. And actually, we've also set environmental KPIs during the construction phase. It's interesting because one of the things that Kiers did, and that lessons learned is going across, is 53-acre site in East Yorkshire. There wasn't enough capacity in the grid to actually connect the mains electricity until much later. So there was a lot of hybrid versions of batteries and you know, a lot of it being off grid in terms of construction. But then what worked and everything else, again, is being passed on through the alliance. So that will go into the other prisons. So I'm like Melissa, I think clear objectives being set with the ISO 19650, which is all language, you know, NEC and all the language ISO 19650 BREEAM are all understood, the supply chain. There's certain specifics within that, particularly prison ones that, you know, how do we do this, how do we do that? But once you've done it once and you've made it easy, and we do that by templates, technical standards, changing BREEAM credits, then all that lessons learned gets passed across the supply chain. So it really benefits the new prisons, but we're now going into accelerated house box and other expansion programs where, you know, we will see probably a number of outstanding buildings being delivered, which will be really interesting at a portfolio level.
Absolutely, and gives, to your point, the main contractors in this example the opportunity to benefit from from each other's work and effort, and then for you to then touch out into industry as well, working with the likes of BRE is only going to create that ripple, isn't it? Yeah, which is awesome. And I think because there was 4 main contractors within the alliance where there's opportunity to step in as a result of failures or different skill sets, then because of an alliance approach, it gives the contractors the opportunity to do that and support one another as they go, which is, yeah, it's great, really novel and pleasing to see. There's a question I've got here around the use of early contractor involvement, and did we see a reduction in the number of sort of early warning notices or compensation events versus a typical project? Now, before you come in and answer that, Melissa or Caron, I guess it's hard to measure to a degree what a typical project would generate in terms of early warnings or CEs, but actually the benefit of those mechanisms in NEC clearly reduces the risk associated with programme delivery and beyond as well. So it's probably a hard question to answer because there's probably different right answers to it. But Melissa, have you got a view generally around the use of ECI and the benefits from an early warning perspective? You're on mute, Melissa, if you're still with us. Okay, we've got a technical issue there, which is fine. I think for the benefit of the audience, I think I've given my personal view on that question, so I can't answer specifically from a prison perspective, but definitely those mechanisms within the NEC, it allows the earlier conversation to mitigate risks, doesn't it? So a bit like from a safety perspective, when we have the opportunity to raise awareness and raise early warnings that way, then the idea is it mitigates and reduces the number of incidents that occur. So let's think positive on that perspective. Have we got Melissa back?
No, I think we've lost her.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think we've lost her briefly, but I'll see if she can rejoin in the meantime.
Yeah, and I don't know, because I don't know what a typical prison project was. Like you say, Melissa will probably have that because it's probably Fossway as our sort of benchmark one, and that's how we tend to measure a lot of things. But certainly, yeah, my personal experience and things of that and how it works is that early contractor involvement is really useful to identify things that you can actually then, particularly with the alliance contract, work on to try and resolve before it's an issue.
Of course. And I guess that probably takes me to the special interest group, Caron, that you referenced. I know there were different ones, but you referenced before in relation to the sustainability aspect. Can you just talk us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think it's been one of the most powerful things. I think if you ask the contractors as well, one of the questions we said to them, has it reduced costs and risk? And it's absolutely, because they can very ask early, what do you mean? I mean, when I went to Eden, it's like they asked for being an exemplar of sustainability, and we're asking for the greenest prisons and sustainability being, integral to delivery of Millsike, and being able to help with them to say, yes, this is what it looks like. There are issues potentially with the supply chain, for example, on specifying early in the contracts things like the sanitary ware, and could it actually deliver high levels of water efficiency, but with the anti-ligature and anti-vandalism, and what if it's not available in the market? So some of that is, well, that's where that technically feasible comes in, and that's where together the alliance start to work with the supply chain. So well, if it's not available now, we can look at it for the future prisons and things as well. Yeah. So it's understanding issues now that might not be an issue on the delivery further down and things as well, and also defining BNG and how that's delivered and things as well. So there's been a lot of what do you mean by this, and actually working with the contractors for it to be challenging but achievable has been really interesting. And also looking at the locations, is the supply chain the same across the country? Are there going to be variations in it? That feedback from the contractors working together and seeing them sharing, and it is really interesting. It's very different. So I think one of the benefits the MOJ has got is the ability to possibly change the construction sector and things as well. As Melissa said, the value of the projects, the power of the contractors, and then as being an informed client means that we quite keen to share lessons learned across other government departments and other industries to sort of help and understand of how to manage contracts better.
Absolutely. None of us have a crystal ball, do we? So to sit and plan and then to learn from what's been achieved needs to be shared. Definitely. Excuse me. You have my support in that. Is Melissa with us?
I am. I apologise. I'm on my mobile now because my laptop has had a moment. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Not a problem at all. Welcome back. Yeah, we can. Thank you for that. We were just having a conversation, Caron and I, about the special interest groups, specifically from a sustainability aspect, which has really helped us further understand those and the benefits of them. And one thing Caron talked about was sharing the lessons learned, whether that's across industry, across government, or just within the department. I wondered then, from a lessons learned point of view, have you got any key lessons that you've learned from the approach, whether it's the procurement strategy, whether it's deliverability, or the mechanisms you've used, any that you'd pick out and share?
I think that the main reason we have the strategy we have and the way we set things up was to try to drive that collaboration, to try to drive a situation where this program leaves a legacy. And I think that it has achieved a lot of those things. As is always the case with projects of this scale, things don't always go to plan. And in the case of planning, we've obviously experienced a lot of delays, not just in planning, but in the usual things in the ground and in other areas that you see on construction projects. And so building in that flexibility into the contract arrangement as early as possible really enabled us to deal with those things in collaboration, which I think is a big lesson from the way that we've done things and from the arrangement. We also have developed a lessons learned portal, and can you call all of those lessons learned lessons yet? No, but the idea is that not just commercial lessons, but buildability lessons in terms of sequencing of works, approach to sites, approach to working with the MOJ, approach to building our specific designs. The aim of that portal is to try to bring together all of that knowledge from all the different parties onto one platform so that you can search it and categorize those lessons, and so that we're able better to, rather than in a kind of stop-start approach where you start a scheme and then all of the knowledge is lost at the end of it, and then in a few years you do something else, to try to maintain that knowledge through what we want to be a kind of long-term infrastructure plan for the MOJ.
Yeah, fantastic, isn't it? Because to your point, there isn't just the 4 prisons in this portfolio, is there? There's the other 10,000 places that you've got to design and build. Sharing those lessons is so vital to succeed. So I love it. I think it's brilliant. The portal, I think, is a really sound idea, because you're too often, I guess, we think of projects as one-offs, and you're only dealing with one main contractor and yes, multiple supply chain members. But actually here you've had an opportunity to be able to share those with the alliance members that you've had, not just contractors but professional service providers as well, which will all benefit from that. It's good. I guess then, from a supply chain perspective, we've had a question in here. How were the participants within the alliance determined? So were the existing supply chains utilised, or were any new contractors or suppliers brought in?
Yeah, so and that, I think, will answer another question in the chat as well, which talked about how many main contractors there are. So 4 main contractors were appointed, and then once they were appointed and on board, as an alliance, we worked together to look at their existing supply chains, to look at the existing prison supply chain that we were using on numbers of our different projects, and then a dynamic purchasing system was established, which brought all of that together and allowed opportunity for new entrants, but also helped provide more information to people who wanted to get into the market on how they might get their products through technical standards, for example, and how they might get involved. So that obviously has to have a robust quality assurance process associated with it, but it encouraged new entrants, and the new entrants piece for us is ongoing because there are obviously constraints associated with working in prisons, and so it certainly wasn't a one-stop shop, create the dynamic purchasing system and done. That's something we are continually looking at in terms of how we expand our supply chain where we've got the opportunity to do so, but also how we leverage that expertise that some of our existing supply chain have from working for so long in the prison environment.
Yeah, of course. And I guess just on that, from a collaborative working perspective, we've had a question in around, were there any specific incentives included within whether FAC-1 or probably FAC-1 to make sure that the suppliers involved were showing the ability to share their best practice, I guess, for the benefit of the programme, as opposed to keeping it to remain competitive?
I think the most important thing in that sense is the structure of the arrangement, more so than what you might traditionally think of incentives, like financial incentives. So having a paid collaboration phase is important, because I think sometimes clients expect contractors to deliver a huge amount of added value, but without the resources or the funds to do so. And so it was really important for us to embed a phase at the start with, like I say, clear objectives, but with the time at the start of the new prisons programme to establish those things. So there was, multiple work streams created where organisations, different organisations had different people within those work streams. Each tier 1 led a different work stream, but that was just a person who led it rather than it being the whole organisation. And so really integrate teams working and delivering on those objectives. That was really important. But also the way that you structure it, because there's a need to maintain competitive tension for all parties, but equally we had 4 contractors and there were 4 prisons to build. So I think everybody knowing that they had a slice of the pie is important, again, in driving people to truly collaborate, because if you create a scenario where everyone knows that there's a risk they won't get anything, then there will always be more kind of cards close to the chest happening. But also we have a KPI mechanism with multiple layers to it that incentivizes through that is designed to allow incentivization financially for things that have a legacy benefit to the MOJ. And again, the FAC-1 allows you flexibility to implement that as appropriate.
Of course, of course. Okay, so we've had a question just popped in then regarding it's regarding disputes. So I guess without disclosing anything, Melissa, how did FAC-1 and the use of NEC foster that sort of sense of collaboration with the attempt to minimise disruption and cost?
So from our perspective, and this is how we like to work with our suppliers in any arrangement, but alliancing certainly helps foster strategic and collaborative relationships. NEC does this in any case, but it's trying to drive out areas of disagreement as early as possible, rather than the kind of traditional method of leaving everything to the end and then having a fight. We don't like to work like that in any case, but NEC tries to drive everyone away from that in terms of good practice contract management. And so through getting closer to each other as organisations and understanding each other's aims and objectives, I just think that the relationships that we have with the organisations now are much more strategic in terms of the links that we have, and therefore we're able to have conversations earlier to try to ward off any of those sorts of things. We haven't, touch wood, had any issues with any disputes, and hopefully we continue that way because of those relationships that we have with contracting organisations.
Yeah, of course.
I was going to add to that, if that's something I'm just saying, sustainability in a way is, people do want to be seen to be sustainable and things as well. So, there's an additional layer of that. But what Melissa said is really important, is the contractors are able to come to us with issues, and 4 different ones. So sometimes it's really simple things. We're getting more knowledge. So the contractors will say, did you know that a standardised, what I thought was a standardised requirement for like a CIBSI TM54 is not the same for all the contractors? And they just say to us, if you do this and you simplify the process, you will get better data, better information. And so we work with the colleagues in technical standards all the time to look at derogations and streamlining the process, and can we put things in technical standards like that just make it easier for everybody. So there's a huge benefit for lots of the way we work as the MOJ as an organisation, and the way we work with the contractors, particularly when they come together, to actually inform real change.
For the benefit of all, isn't it, Caron? Absolutely, and it's accepting the challenge received is for the benefit of whether it's the project, the programme, or even a legacy that's left for something new that we don't know of yet. So building that trust and delivering against that is so important. But the trust from the contractors to have the ability to speak openly with you guys as clients in this example, to know you're going to try and solve something on behalf of everybody is vital. And the trust that you need from the contractors to be honest enough to raise the concerns they may have or the challenges, but deliver at the same time is also vital. So yeah, I think credit to you guys in what you've described and how you've managed to deliver it. I think it's fantastic. I really do. And I guess that probably takes me to successes then. Both of you talked so much about the things that you've done as a programme, and the successes in that. I guess easy for me to ask, can you pick a couple of key successes that have really been pulled from the approach that you've taken on the prison programme, and maybe just if that's Millsike, then that's okay as well?
I'll start then. So I guess the biggest one from the prison services perspective is that in terms of the wider programme, over 6,500 new prison places have been delivered, plus Millsike's further 1,500, which will be added to that total following mobilisation. So that is obviously the core aim of the programme, and has been really important from a management of prison capacity perspective. But beyond just the delivery of high quality prison places, the programme will leave a legacy, not just in terms of that rehabilitative outcome piece, but also construction delivery. So that lessons sharing portal is one really good example, because it allows contractors and the supply chain, professional services, delivery teams to share information across the programme, even on programmes that they don't have any interface with. In addition to that, the new prisons design has been improved through collaboration of contractors and design teams. So they generated during that collaboration phase what we call big ideas, hundreds of them, that will support with efficiency, value engineering, and buildability. And we also achieved a lot of savings in terms of economies of scale by purchasing components across schemes. And that's also helped us smooth demand to mitigate some of the potential programme delays that would be associated by the spikes in the market that we're driving. So beyond all of those things for this programme, that's left a legacy of best practice that we can now use moving forward.
Absolutely. And I think there's a point just popped up on my screen there in the chat around what you've achieved, the success that you've achieved so far, and how do we share this with other public sector clients. We talked before a little bit about lessons learned and the sharing of those, and I think it's important to remember from an audience perspective that the PRISM programme is a case study within the construction playbook. So it's known across government as a different way of doing things, and you know, arguably a better way of doing things. It may not work for every scenario, but the chance for others to learn from it and do something similar is absolutely there. And I know Melissa and I we have conversations around how we can continue to keep the conversation going for others to benefit. So point your clients in the direction of the construction playbook, or please reach out. Well, putting words in Melissa's mouth, I'm happy to help with that as well, because the benefit is there for everybody to see, not just from an MOJ perspective, but from an industry point of view, from a supply chain point of view, and beyond to some of the sustainable items that Caron's talked about as well. Okay, probably going to draw it to a close. Thank you for the questions so far. I've tried to pick out themes and bits that have raised. We've tried to answer some directly, so hopefully we've considered most in there, if not all. I think lastly then, from my perspective, what's in store for 2025 and beyond? How can you get better with this?
We've certainly still got a lot to do. So we've got the remaining 14,000 prison places to deliver. We've got a number of projects that are entering into main works in the next 12 months. So it's a really exciting time to be involved in the new prison capacity programme. It's all building on, you know, what we've already done, building on that knowledge, working now with fairly mature contractor relationships and professional services relationships. So more of the same, but continuous improvement, and certainly not more of the same when it comes to the types of projects we're delivering. Like I say, it's not just brand new prison builds. We also have those expansion projects, new house blocks, major refurb work, and lots of other things happening in the portfolio. So it is a very exciting time to be part of the programme. And selfishly, we are shortly due to advertise some excellent roles in the commercial team. We look out if you're interested in a career move, because like I say, it is a really exciting programme to work on.
You couldn't miss an opportunity. Melissa, Caron, thank you both so much for this. I've learned lots. Hopefully everybody's benefited as well. Thank you to the audience that have dialed in. Thank you for your questions. For me, some key takeaways, it is certainly around collaboration, common objectives, common success measures and strategic aims. It's something you talked about. Market stewardship was one really key point for me, which led me to definition of pipelines. Having a clear pipeline allows the suppliers to be certain of work that's ahead of them and to be able to collaborate to compete, as I've said before, which benefits everybody. So yeah, thank you. Some key takeaways there. Please look out for any other NEC webinars that may start to be advertised. Register your interest, and this recording will be available soon. Okay, thank you everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care now. Bye.